Welcome to Mindset Mavericks. Today's guest is Roy Osing, a business leader with an incredible track record of scaling companies and transforming them into billion-dollar enterprises. As former president of TELUS, Roy took the Canadian telecom company from its startup stages to an impressive billion-dollar annual sales. And through his innovative, audacious, unheard-of ways, he's going to teach us how to be different, which is one of the other subjects that he's a bit of an expert on. So Roy's created a series of books, Be Different or Be Dead, which I'm excited to speak to him about today. So rather than go into it too much now, welcome to Mindset Mavericks, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, John. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you. I'm grateful.
So there's lots of different topics we're going to be exploring, but where I wanted to start was right at those early days and the big visions. Can you take us back to the beginning? What was the vision for TELUS when you first joined? And what role did you play in shaping it?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I was asked to undertake leadership of a part of the company, which was a subset segment of a monopoly telephone company in those days, with the advent of the internet. And so the company was set up, or the organization was set up to basically, I call it, unleash the power of the internet for customers. We were asked to actually take that on and grow the business. And so it was part of the overall thing. We were faced with moving from a monopoly to a competitive firm, to an engineering dominated, to a marketing firm, heavily unionized, cultural differences, voice services to data services. I mean, it was a huge challenge that we had. And so basically it was early stage. So it wasn't brand new startup. So we were already in the data business to a degree, nowhere near a billion. And we didn't know what the potential was. We really didn't. We knew that it was significant, but we didn't know where it was. And we just started marching, doing some really disruptive things, certainly disruptive at the time. And now that I've been fussing with this for 40 years, it's still disruptive, which is something we can talk about. And that concerns me. That business today is 18 billion, and it's just part of TELUS. Okay. So my role wasn't president of the entire company. It was much larger. It was the data piece that was mined out that we actually attacked and grew. And so we had a team of people that were audacious. They were excited about doing things differently. And we just made it happen, doing some really, really simple things. And to be honest with you, I got them right now. I get goosebumps when I think, okay, of what we were able to achieve over a number of years. And it didn't happen overnight, obviously, as you can appreciate, this kind of cultural change, particularly. I mean, performance is a result of culture. In this case, it was a huge change we had to go through in order to then realize the kind of benefits that we would get from a marketplace that had a high potential and growth. So that's my story. It's painful. I mean, I learned that pain was a strategic concept. I really did. I mean, it was horrifically painful to make the kind of changes and get the kind of progress we wanted. But, looking back, it was well worth it. It was well worth it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to hear about some of the innovative changes you made and disrupting an industry back in those days. And you mentioned some of the pain that you went through. What were some of those biggest challenges that did cause you the biggest pain?
Well, people didn't want us to succeed. I mean, there's inside the company, it was silo. You had the old school kind of silo of voice-based services and all of that kind of thing. And here were the kind of startup mavericks, if you want, getting all the attention, right? Because it was a sexy business and nobody really knew much about it. We were all learning. And so I think the biggest challenge for us as a team was to fight off the sharks within the company who wanted to eat us. Okay, and I don't say that in any mean way, other than the fact that was resistance to change and the inability to accept the opportunities that were available for others. And in a way, I guess it's an expression of narcissism that is rampant today anyways. To me, that was the biggest challenge. But the way we overcame that, and this is a message to everybody listening, look, you are going to face roadblocks. You're going to face people who are waiting for you to turn your head so they can knife you in the back. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is sometimes. And the way to beat them is to outperform. That's it. It ain't about words. It's about actions. You just need to create a strategy for yourself, whether it's your business or your career, and you just need to perform. Once you do that consistently, people will go, okay, yeah, maybe there's something to this. And that's what we did. We didn't pay any attention okay, to a lot of that stuff in terms of responding to it. We just created a strategy, a different strategy, I might add. I have a disruptive way of thinking about strategy, and we just executed it, execute. And after a while, people just kind of sort of said, "Oh, okay, well this sounds exciting. I want to be part of
Mm.
that." And we kind of went from there. But to me, the reticence of your prior teammates to be
Mm.
supportive, right, was a huge shock for us. Maybe we should have anticipated it. I don't know, but it was painful. It was painful to everyone. And at a personal level, I mean, it affected relationships on the inside of the company, and it affected the kind of family environment that we had as a telephone company up to that point in time. And it kind of foreshadowed, I think, the challenges in every business that they face when they're undergoing discontinuity. And that's really what this was. I mean, the internet was a force to be reckoned with. It was a discontinuity that we were responding to, and the culture had a hard time with that. The existing culture didn't accept that we had to make that change, and to do it was quite painful.
Yeah, I think a lot of particularly big companies do struggle with change, and it can be anything from not wanting other people to succeed, being jealous that somebody else has got the role to head up that new innovation, or it could just be actually a change going to come in. Somebody who was previously competent in their role is now going to be made incompetent because they don't know what they're doing anymore. So I think there's a lot of reasons for people being adverse to change. But what are some of the tips or strategies that you could give to help people come along with that change and embrace it rather than going up against it?
Well, the first thing you have to realize is that in any journey, you need a context, and I call it a strategic context. It's not a matter of just doing stuff, it's about doing stuff with purpose. And I find that there's too many people that are enthralled with tactics, right? They're enthralled with AI, they're enthralled with IP technology, they're enthralled with social media and all this kind of stuff, and they want to go play in it. And I'm constantly asked, what do you think of this? What do you think of AI? What do you think in terms of what they're doing? And I would always say, I have no idea. I mean, what I need to understand is what you're trying to achieve. And then I will
Mm.
evaluate the action that you've taken. Okay. When there's a huge change that you're facing, you need to reinvent yourself. You need to create a new journey. And so what we did is, first of all, I looked around as a leader and said, well, all right, I need a tool to help me do that. And of course, all the tools, and they're still here. Strategic planning 101, dude. It's all about the efficacy of the plan, right? What it doesn't talk about, it to the degree that I needed it, was execution. I mean, execution gets you results, not the plan. Okay. The execution resides in your right brain, not in your logic, right? Because the day you put the plan to bed based on the pristineness of following and conforming to academic principles around planning, it's out of date and you better
Mm.
get ready to move, right? So the model didn't allow me to do it. So I created my own planning process, which I still use with businesses today. In fact, it's a process that I call strategic game planning, and we literally can create your plan in 48 hours and having you on the street executing it on the 49th hour. And it's really simple. And just dumb the whole thing down. It's a planning process made to execute. The reason I'm taking some time on this is that it's so important. When you go into change, you need to redefine your context. So the process that I invented, and I'm still using it today with people, they don't believe it works until I actually take them through it, is to create a strategy by answering three questions. The first question is, how big do you want to be? That's a question about growth, top line revenue growth. It's not about net income. It's not about EBITDA. It's about top line revenue, because that is the only expression that represents how the market feels about you, is top line. So where do you want to be in 24 months? I don't believe in 5-year plans. Never had a
Mm.
5-year plan in my life, because the fourth year never shows up, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
just keep moving it along, right? The hockey stick just keeps going further on. So the how big do you want to be is a statement of growth that basically drives the character of the strategy. Now, this is disruptive because most planning processes end up in calculating what the financials are going to be. The problem I've seen is people look at the numbers and they go, they're not good enough. Let's change the
Mm.
assumptions. and let's not change the strategy, which is absolutely stupid, quite frankly. How can you start changing numbers without changing the strategy? So my process, get the kids off the street, start with how big, which is really a declaration of intent, okay, without really knowing how you're going to get there. And of course, CEOs find this extremely uncomfortable because they want to do trend lines, right? Extrapolations, right? And I keep saying to them, how big drives innovation? The fact that you don't know forces you to innovate. If you know, then how big is not big enough? And so we have this interesting set of dynamics. The second question is, who are you going to get the money? I call it, who do you intend to serve? And this is a question about customer groups that have the latent potential to deliver your growth. Okay, so I call them who groups. Obviously, we want as few as possible because we have limited resources. We define those, and then we ask the critical question, what do they crave? You see, it's not about needs anymore. Everybody fundamentally has got their needs satisfied. And if you want to compete in the needs space, first of all, you got tons of competitors. And secondly, it's price competitive. It is hugely price dominated. The craving space is all about feelings. It's all about emotion. It's all about passion. It's all about desires. It's all about what you lust for. It's all about what you covet. People pay premium prices for solutions that play into that space, and because there's no competition, right? So the second part of the strategy is absolutely brilliant to work out with a client. Who are you going to serve and what do they crave? Because they've never been asked the question before. And it's amazing to me that they have difficulty with that. So anyways, we go through that. Third question is, how are you going to compete and win? Not in the market, in the who groups. This isn't a question about marketplace competitiveness. It's about who group competitives because you've decided to serve a cluster, right? Well, the issue of differentiation today is kind of like really bad, to be honest with you. And everybody claims they're best. Everybody claims they're better. Everybody claims they're the market leader. Everybody claims they're number one. They got the best customer service. It's horrific. It doesn't mean anything. So I had to create my own differentiation tool, and I call it the only statement. You don't want to be the best of the best. You want to be the only one who does what you do. Okay, so you understand your target market's called the who's. You know what they crave. Now you got to figure out how to be the only one that satisfies their cravings in the way that you want to do it. And so when you get the answers to all those three, you have your strategy. We did this. We redefined who we wanted to be when we grew up. And so we were now in a position to go to the tactical level, Jon, and start to pull in, well, all right, how are we going to execute, right? How are we going to play out our only statement? Okay, how are we going to do all this stuff? So it degenerated into sub-activities with meaning, but we didn't start there. And so everyone listening, you go through a change, you do the work. The work is get the context right, get your journey right, then go to the fun details of how does AI play into that? How does social media play into that? What are the communication channels that make sense in that? You got to start there. And we did it, and we just kept it alive. I mean, this was like a 24 period, a 24-month plan. Right? It was 24 periods of 30 days. And the reason we defined it that way is to keep the focus on what? Execution. The other thing that I would say to people is, look, we're not going to spend a lot of time on the plan. We're going to spend the 48 hours, like I just said, because heading west is a good strategy. Now, why do I say that? It's because it's not that we're stupid. It's just that there's so many variables out there. How can you possibly think that you can perfect the plan to begin with? And yet, 80% of our time is spent on that plan and 20% on execution. I flipped it around. We spent 20% to get the plan just about right, heading west, and 80% on the stuff that we were just talking about. How are we going to execute this puppy? What are the programs we're going to implement? What are the key success factors, KRAs, all that kind of stuff. But the plan piece, we just said we're going to get it just about right because we really don't know. We're going to learn through execution, and we're going to modify it on the run.
Yeah, no, that is.
I have to tell you, I have people shaking their head at me Now, these are the textbook crawlers, all right? They're shaking their heads at me. How can you possibly run a business by getting the plan just about right? Surely, Roy, you need to get it perfect. And I go, yeah, I think I have. Because in your definition, what you think is perfect is me conforming to somebody else's set of planning principles. Well, I'm sorry, I just don't do that. That's not who I am. I go where the results are, and that is on the front lines, the coal face with the customer, getting stuff done. And we basically created a planning process, a journey definition and roadmap, and a culture based on that. I mean, hell, we were rewarding tries. As a
Mm.
part of my direct report team performance plan, I would say, how many tries have you made this week? Because if you haven't tried something, you've done diddly squat. Now, I won't allow you to make the same mistake twice, John. I will not allow you to do that because that just tells me you didn't learn from it the first time, right? But if you want to make 10 mistakes, go make them, dude. People will think I'm crazy. Well, I know you're not going to go try and spend $10 million and make a mistake. I know that because I trust you. You see what I'm saying? It's just all those dynamics created an environment for growth as opposed to holding people down, controlling them by rules and procedures. I mean, I just cleansed the environment of all that stuff. Didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting, and I've certainly seen it. I think the first thing you see when you open a pitch deck is forecasting and doing it the other way around. So it's looking at what are the numbers going to be in 4 or 5 years' time, and doing projections as opposed to working backwards, which is a very novel idea. And I think that leads very much into your whole book series as well. So Be Different or Be Dead, and it is starting to build on where that has come from. I'm starting to see that now. I think the other thing that it does offer is flexibility. So as you say, if you've got a 5-year plan and something goes wrong in that plan 1 year in, it does make it a lot more difficult to pivot and start navigating through troubles. So in terms of...
Well, it gives... I'm sorry.
Go for it.
No, I was just going to say the 5-year planning view gives you permission to put it off. Well, if you have that mindset, you're not executing. And my whole thing is about execute, execute, execute. That's where the results and the performance come from. That's where hell, just doing stuff, quite frankly, is a competitive advantage because there's so many people out there that don't. They think too much. They ponder too much, right? They're trapped in rigidity and they can't move. Well, all right, be nimble and flexible, do stuff, make mistakes, learn stuff, blah, blah, blah. And already you're different. Already you have an advantage.
And how did you see that manifest itself back in those early days? What are some of those audacious strategies that drove growth?
So what I would generally say is, because I'm a guy that goes from the top context and drives it down. Okay, I'm not a tactical up guy, right? So as we were just discussing, the whole notion of a strategic game plan, okay, that was loose on strategy and tight on execution was disruptive, right? People just couldn't figure out how that would work, even though year over year, period over period, top line revenue was going up. And people say, well, what are you doing? I said, all right, let's take a step back, right? We've created context for ourselves. So there were a number of things in the strategy building process and execution element that were disruptive, okay? Because people want to get to the details. Okay, on the strategy piece, this only statement was groundbreaking. The way to differentiate yourself is to be the only ones that do what you do. A lot of people would say, well, Roy, we're not, and I hear this all the time, we're not special at anything. And I said, well, come on, let's work it through. And generally, the reason for that is they start out with what they think makes them tick, as opposed to going through and doing the work. I want to know how big you want to be. I want to know who you're going to serve and what they crave. Now let's talk about how you can satisfy those cravings by being the only one who does what you do. So you get the sequence, right? I mean, it's dogmatic. I mean, my background is mathematics, even though I've never solved a business problem with a differential equation. But the logic is just like boom, boom, boom. So the only statement was huge. The other thing that I would have fun with is this whole concept called gargling Google. Now, the whole notion here is we live in a world of copiers. We live in a world of copycatters. I mean, hell, benchmarking and Google, all right, today, I think, are the worst enemies to differentiation because all people do is go look at what others are doing And they make this nonsensical conclusion that if they copy company A, right, in terms of what they're doing, then they in fact will get a huge boost in performance, which is crazy. The conditions are different, et cetera, et cetera. There may be some opportunities to benchmark from an operations point of view to get some improvements, but never from a strategic point of view. And yet people are actually using it. So I coined this phrase: stop gargling Google, put it down, stay off it, go create something, right? And so I came up with this thing: is why would you want to depend on somebody else's genius? Why don't you go create your own? Why are you being so freaking lazy? Come on. But there again, it's that sort of plate, right, of easy technology stuff that's there for people to feed on. And they feed on them. And at the same time, they go, how come I'm not being successful? So they don't realize that whole piece. On the execution side, man, we had a lot of fun. So the whole notion of disruption here was tighten it up. I mean, I want the execution piece so tight. So here are the kinds of things that we did. Effective execution, in my view, is all about line of sight leadership. Now, what line of sight means is, as a leader, you translate what the strategy means to each and every employee in your organization. Let me repeat that. Each and every employee must know their role in the new strategy. If they don't, they will invent it themselves, and dysfunction happens. Okay. So I laugh because people say, oh, I got this, everybody's doing their own thing. And I go, well, so what are you doing as a leader? Have you taken the time? Look, I had 9,000 people in my organization. I actually created alignment plans with people in the organization so that they would have clarity. I call it direct line of sight into the new strategy. That is absolutely essential. If you don't have line of sight in your organization between the strategy and employees, execution fails. That's point number one. Point number two is you need to be a fingerprint leader. What do I mean by that? I mean, don't be an idiot and delegate the things that you as a leader should be doing yourself. Okay, my God, Roy's talking about micromanagement. You bet I am. The things that leaders should do need to be micromanaged, hence put your fingerprints on them. Okay, you don't send quote, subordinate out to sell your strategy to your employees. Okay, you don't do that. You do that as a leader. You convince them to follow you, to join the journey, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is a huge piece because it gives people an opportunity to question and clarify. If they don't question and clarify, guess what fails? Execution, right? It's pretty darn simple. And so that was another piece. The third one I'll just mention, I got too many. We don't have enough time. We could do a whole show on this, John. The third one I'll mention is what I call cleanse the inside. What is cleanse the inside? Cleanse the inside at a high level is a philosophy to increase the viscosity of the value delivery system. Because execution needs to have flawless delivery of value from the inside to the outside. And yet, when you actually look at how a company runs sometimes, there are dumb rules, there's grunge, there's bureaucracy, there's too many levels of there's all this stuff going on that prevents value from being delivered. And so I had a series of programs called Cleanse the Inside, everywhere from killing dumb rules to cutting the crap, which was really my way of getting the language so that people would really know it. I must say my peers didn't really appreciate the fact that I would call things crap because that admitted that we did things in the past that were no longer relevant. Really? Come on. That's exactly what happened. Doesn't mean we were stupid then. It means we need to cleanse it now. So that created a whole lot of benefits, which really helped us as well. And there were other things in the HR area. I recruited by hiring for goosebumps. Okay, this drives HR people crazy because I've actually had a couple of hosts that when I explained to them what hiring goosebumps was all about, they couldn't handle it. We had to terminate the show because it was against HR principles. Let me give you a brief overview. Okay, here's the logic. How can you provide dazzling service experiences to customers if the people delivering those services hate human beings? All right. All right. They would rather be doing HTML coding or taking inventory, but you got them in front of customers, your most valuable asset. So there's no way that a dazzling experience is going to happen. And so the challenge is, let's hire people that actually like humans, that were born with this innate desire to care for each other. How do we get those? So we had panel interviews, right? And I was always sitting on them, pretty intimidating. President of the company sitting there interviewing somebody for a service rep position. I know to many of you that will sound stupid. It's all about priorities and getting execution done. Okay, so if you're not committed to that, then you're simply not going to make any advantage. So I would always ask these people, do you love people? Now that was really funny because, they're leaning in and now they're leaning back because they know it's a trick question. They just can't figure out where the bloody president's going with this. And of course they would say, yes, Roy, I love people. And I would ask them the second question. Tell me a story that would show me how much you love people. This separated it, right? Because the people that were treating this as kind of like a theoretical approach, they told me a story that left me cold and I ushered them out of the room. The people that really got it would tell me a story that was rich in caring and passion and emotion. And guess what it did, John? I got them right now. It left me with goosebumps.
Yeah.
I would hire that person and I would teach them the job. Okay. That's far easier. I can't teach anybody to love people, right? You can teach them how to grin, right? And answer a phone with a smile in their voice. But we all know there's a lot of people that do that and still they hate you. All right. But you can't teach them to love humans. So that was another one. Now, what did that do? It aided execution because we recruited people in the organization with a human component, with a compassionate component. The other thing it did, by the way, is it just drove up employee engagement because now we had people on the team that actually cared about one another, right? And so the spillover effects were absolutely dramatic. You can tell I love this stuff because I'm going on way too long, but it's so cool.
Well, I think actually through our conversation already, there's one theme that is just throughout all of it, and it is about people. I think from the messages of delivering strategy direct to every individual to having those people moments in interviews. I think everything you've spoken about so far is just doing the best for the employees, for the staff. And that is building connection. It is building teams, and it's making a willingness to feel part of the team. And I think that's definitely something that's coming across to me anyway, certainly from my conversations.
The only thing I will add to that, like I will say in a very hard way, my job as a leader was not to make employees happy. It was not that. My job as a leader was to drive the performance of the organization. So the way I did that is to create strategic context, meaningful work, rewarding work, right? And saying thank you, because I had this other thing called leadership by serving around, okay, which basically meant I was in the workplace asking people, how can I help? Now, this wasn't about how can I help you in your life? No, this was about how can I help you do your job so that you can execute our strategy better. And so this is a huge disconnect, okay, for a lot of people who think that that doing things right to make the employee to increase employee engagement is a standalone item of work. It's not. It's done only after you understand what are you trying to achieve, who are you going to serve, what's your only statement, what are the key growth strategies. Now let's talk about recruitment and employee engagement within that context, right? So one of the things we did is we created a set of values, right, that were homeomorphic to the new strategy. So the values were all about innovation, teamwork, change, unleashing the power of the internet with customized integrated solutions. Now we had a framework for the culture and employee engagement. We did not ask the HR VP to go figure out how to improve employee engagement. No. You're going to get the wrong answer. What you need to do is show them line of sight and help them do it. So that's the other big takeaway for you here and for your listeners is I'm not advocating a happy employee population. It's my job to create that through strategy. Okay. It's my job to do that. I should not be asking them to feel fulfilled in their job unless they understand it, unless they understand how they fit, right? Unless we've done things with everybody that makes them more harmonious. So we talked about harmonious workplaces. That's not the end. It's a means to the end. The end is top line revenue going to $1 billion. And don't ever forget that. Hard on it. You got to be hard on that. And what I find is the HR weenie who terminated my podcast show couldn't handle that. How on earth could you hire for Goosebumps? There's nothing, there's no evidence to support that would ever work. There's no books on it, that nobody's written on it. And I go, I'm sorry, man. It's just one of a number of things that I think had some sort of impact. Now, if you're asking me to do a regression analysis or a causation analysis to prove that that independent variable, right, had this much a contribution on the top line, I can't do that. And I would never do that. That's a silly thing to do. All it does is assuage the left side of your brain, and we don't get results from the left-hand side of the brain. We get them from the right-hand side. And so you run into that and people's unwillingness to accept some pretty simple human things. Because to your point, at the end of the day, it's not technology that creates the dazzling moment. Even though the algorithmic players think so, it's the people. But you need to unleash them in the right context. That's all I would say.
What I'd love to know, Roy, is where some of these audacious things came from. It's a lot of thought ideas which have gone against the grain. So where did that start?
I don't know. I was one of these guys that spent so much time with, quote, I'll say frontline people. It's people closer to the coalface where we met customers. I spent so much time doing that I garnered trust and integrity from their perspective, and they would share things because I would ask them, how can I help? That's the basis of leadership by serving around. It's not aimlessly wandering through the workplace asking, how are things going? It's pointed questions. How are we doing it with the execution of the strategy? And some of them would say, I don't know what the strategy was. Well, that created another conversation with their bosses, let me tell you. But generally, I started to get ideas and notions. And I've always been an experimenter. I've always been the guy at the right-hand side of the distribution curve who said, why the hell not? This is a really cool thing to do, right? So I would try the goosebump thing. I didn't call it goosebumps in the day. It was just I ended up having to label it for conversations like this. And I thought, well, but the intent was the same. It was like, I got to figure out how to identify people that have this unbelievable bias towards humans. How do I do that? And so the stories came out, my 2 questions, and then I thought, hey, that's something I can talk about that. And so I labeled it. But no, it was just a series of what did I need at the time? What was important to our performance at the time? We needed to hire the right people. We needed to make sure that everybody understood the strategy, which drove line of sight and all those alignment plans. So it was just kind of like opportunistic and learning as we go. Is part of this whole thing that I talk about called planning on the run. Right? Planning isn't about putting it together and then letting it go. It's about putting it together and working it and learning and adjusting. And I call that planning on the run. And I think that approach has always been in my head. It's always been in my soul. I have it running through my veins. It's like nothing is static. Everything is in a state of dynamism. We just need to figure out what that is. And we need to figure out how to respond to it. And maybe even anticipate it and be ahead of the curve. Didn't always happen, but that's okay. That's okay. So I think it was just part of who I am.
Well, it seems certainly the Goosebump principles worked for you. Getting $1 billion in sales, you're getting the right people in the right place. So was there any particular audacious sales strategies you were using to help lead that growth?
Well, first of all, I'll say something audacious. I don't think we need salespeople. I think what we need customer relationship people. And if you do a good enough job building relationships, they will buy. And so the whole notion here is, I don't believe in flogging. And the world is replete with what I call sales product floggers. It's not their fault because they're paid to flog. They flog products and services. Okay, unfortunately, they're not paid to build relationships. We talk about it. I happen to be one of the few people that actually explicitized it because I reframed the sales compensation plan around building relationships by using customer perception research, or not research, surveys that ask the customer about how Roy behaved. Was he polite? Did he follow up? Did he keep his promises? All that kind of stuff. That's brand affecting behavior, right? And sales, they affect the brand. And so I went back into it and said, okay, I'm not gonna fuss with the name, but my intent really is to transform these dudes into relationship builders and problem solvers, right? And I want them to be friends. I want them to be friends. I don't want to have people saying to me, well, you got a bunch of salespeople and all they want to do is sell me internet service. That's not what I want. And hence the name cravings. And so transforming them around this notion of cravings was just kind of like amazing. Like, first of all, they didn't even know what the question, what do your customers crave means. They thought, what? Well, oh, this is a trick. And so the sales piece ended up to be, I shouldn't say we never really completed it, to be honest. Okay, but the path was to transform them out of sales into relationship building by using performance management tools, setting objectives, et cetera, and allowing them to understand the behavioral changes that they needed to exhibit without beating them over the head. The relationship between marketing and sales was not the way it should have been, and so that was a huge piece of work. And so I introduced what I call internal report cards that had sales rating marketing on what they got and marketing rating sales based on their performance and their support of marketing. So I had a lot of these internal customer supplier kind of report cards going on, and again, they were just intended to help people see how they were being perceived, trusting that an honest person would react to that perception data. It's kind of like a 360 in a more microscopic kind of like environment. And so we tried a number of those things. And I must say, sales at first were mortified. They were mortified. And it didn't surprise me because sales, and they're still this way, sales is a beast that is really good at something when they're getting paid. The problem is, if you don't have a compensation plan to get the right behaviors, they will keep doing what they've always done, which is flog, flog, flog. And I know I'm being general, okay? I know there's exceptions to this, so don't hold me to that. But generally speaking, if you ask people, what is the perception of sales in the world, what do they say? They're aggressive, right? I feel uncomfortable because they're pushing shit at me. And that's true. Well, that's not their fault. It's a fault of leadership. And I took action to try and address some of that.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a really good process in place to teach the why as well, about why you're putting those changes in, which does make people a lot more amenable to going with that change as well. So in terms of scaling though, so I'd imagine when you are scaling to such a big, wide company, I'd imagine it's quite a difficult thing to do to keep up the standards within a business. So how did you manage to do that?
Well, first of all, we never had a scaling objective. I mean, that's a word that's put on typically cost containment is what it is, right? In other words, you don't lead with revenue. Scaling to me, even though we didn't think about it this way, is all about top line revenue first, and then looking for the most cost-effective ways of satisfying that demand, right? And so getting it in a way where you can grow revenues disproportionate to the growth of cost. To me, in my world, that's what scaling is. So everything we've been talking about so far is about the revenue line. The cost line was managed at a kind of like, I'll say, holistic level, because as long as margins, okay, we're going in the right direction, okay, from programs like cleansing the inside, right, we're dealing with processes and systems, et cetera, then I wasn't fussing with it. Like, the last thing I wanted to do is give everybody the signal that we're going to drive costs down. No, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to drive revenues up disproportionate to the rate of growth of cost, because that's true scaling. Most people think about it as a cost side. Well, it's not. In fact, if you get focused on that, you deserve to be called a cost cop, right? My world was all about growing top line revenue. And so we would look at the rate of growth on the top of rate. How's revenues going? Oh, revenues are going up 30%. Costs are going up 15%. Good. All right. That's good. My margins are going the way they should go. And we just managed it. If something came up through my wanderings around and leadership by serving around, if some stuff come up, then from a cost point of view, we would go chase it. But generally speaking, I didn't want to give mixed messages while at the same time wanting to run the business from an effective point of view, right? Using all the what I would call traditional cost management practices. But I didn't want those to be leaders at all. Okay. I wanted to deal with them as I had to. Clearly, the priority for scalers out there is your top line. Okay, go to work on your top line. Have it grow disproportionate. In fact, you can set objectives. I used to set kind of objectives saying, well, I want this much more improvement in margin, and I know where my revenues are going. Ergo, you used the term reverse engineering earlier. I would reverse engineer the cost line and say, okay, you need to run your business with this cost envelope. If you can't, then my margins are going to suffer because I know where the revenue line's going, and I don't want my margins to suffer because I'll tell you what, the top line isn't going to suffer. We will keep marching to that. So you better figure out a way to improve the way we do business so we can gain that margin improvement that we're looking for.
In terms of the people side of it, was there anything specific you did to ensure people still felt part of that whole brand as you were scaling? I'd imagine once you start getting more and more employees and there's more people per department doing particular roles, it can start to feel a bit disconnected.
Yeah, well, what I did was, as I said earlier, I spent a lot of time in the workforce with with employees, asking how can I help. It became kind of like an expected thing, and I would get feedback, so I would have an idea where we may have some challenges, and we could respond to those. I held what I call bear pit sessions, which were kind of fun. That was Roy in the pit, with a ton of employees on my own with no entourage, basically saying, hey, how are we doing with the plan? You believe it? Blah, blah, blah. So that notion of regular communication and feedback, okay, was absolutely vital. And so when new people come on, and also revisiting the line of sight work that we did. Okay, are we still in alignment with the strategy that we've created? Because the strategy was kind of like organic, right? Like year over year, it would have some nuances in terms of change. And so you always had to go back and say, all right, do my employees still have direct line of sight into that strategy? Well, I go ask them. And we go through, we do a quote audit, line of sight audit, and find out and make some fine tunings, etc. And so it was a matter of living with the wave. As the wave progressed, we stayed on the wave. We stayed up on the wave, not inside the wave. Never thought about it that way before. Thank you for that. You got that out of me.
But no, I think it's a great.
And so
it's a great way.
We tried to be on top of
it. That's certainly the internal storytelling side of it. But in terms of how you were presenting yourself to the world as a brand, what things did you do to ensure that storytelling the company was reaching the audience?
Well, the only statement that we created was all about being the only one that unleashed the power of the internet by providing customized solutions, customized integrated solutions. And it was true because don't forget, we came from a voice world. So I had access to all those voice products and services that I could integrate with data, right? And I had some legacy data services as well. So we had an unbelievable power to create what I call value packages. And that's how we promoted it. Okay, we promoted it. We're the only ones that can do that. So we took the only statement and it became the framework for our communications programming all the time. In fact, we didn't really come up with this. We bought a cellular company called ClearNet Communications in Eastern Canada. And at the time we bought them, that made us national in terms of the cellular network. When we bought them, they had an advertising campaign called The Future is Friendly. And the whole idea there was, from ClearNet's point of view, is they wanted customers to be to be smitten by how easy Clarinet could make new technology adoption for them. I was also had the chief marketing officer role in addition to the internet president. So I looked at this and go, wow, this makes a lot of sense. Here we have a telco being dragged from monopoly right into the data world, and that data world is getting really, really, really complicated in terms of technology. That's a really good brand message to use in conjunction with our only statement, unleashing the power of the internet. Okay, making it friendly. So we adopted it. So what we did is we took the future is friendly, and we basically use that as a brand position for the entire company, not just the data world and cellular, but we brought it all together. Now, the interesting thing is, guess what? That campaign is still alive. We're talking 22 years, John.
Wow.
Okay. And what it is it's a campaign where we use animals, right, to personify the whole notion of friendliness. Because, everybody loves bunnies. They love hippos.
They do. Yep.
They love, right? Positioning them around solutions in a friendly, fun, kind of like quirky way has been the company's strategy for a long time, continues to be. And yeah, that started way back in the day when we actually purchased a cellular company who had the foresight at that time of landing on that as a strategy. And so, yeah, and it continues to go, and it's so recognizable. And my wife will see a television ad with a white background. She goes, "Okay, here comes the animals." I go, "Yep, that's my company. Yeah, that's my company."
Yeah, no, it's a great lesson, because I think one of the difficulties now particularly is trying to get that connection with your audience and trying to stand out, which is difficult. I say it's a crowded market. There's technology is everywhere now. Is there any particular tips you can give to businesses to try and stand out in crowded markets?
Yeah, it reminds me of my rant that you've probably tweaked here. Like you've heard of the work done around blue oceans, the blue ocean strategy, right? So the blue ocean strategy, authors who've never run a business, they advocate that the way to get the best competitive strategy is to choose uncontested markets. Those are called blue oceans, right? At the principle level, gee, that's a good idea. At the practical level, however, 99.9% of businesses in the world live in red oceans, oceans that are highly competitive, fickle customers, high rates of turnover, price competition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so whereas it would be really nice to find a blue ocean, the chances are, for us mere mortals, we will continue to be in red oceans. So the secret here, or the challenge, is to help people survive and thrive in red oceans, not believe. Because if you're going to believe that there's a blue ocean there, you will go broke and you will die. Be different or be dead. It's as simple as that. And so what I would say to people out there is, look, you're in a red ocean. You need to survive it by being different, but you can't figure it out without doing the work. The work that we talk about today, about how big do you want to be? Who do you want to serve? What do they crave? What is your only statement? If you do that work, you will figure out how to be truly unique in a marketplace. You will never figure it out if you do what you think you are, because that's simply your view of you. And it's not about you. It's about them, i.e. the market and customers. Don't make it about you, because that's just proliferating narcissistic thinking. And we got enough of that out there, guys. We need some creative thought. So do the work. How big? Who do you want to serve? How are you going to compete and win by being the only ones? And reach out. I love to help people on this stuff. I get people emailing me, John, all the time, roy.osing@gmail.com, saying, "Hey, Roy, I've just created my draft only statement. What do you think?" Man, makes my day. Makes my day. I'm here to help on the journey, because a journey is so important. We're just contaminated, and I'm sorry to use strong words, but that's who I am. We're contaminated with a thought process that prevents us from standing out, from being different. We don't like that behavior. Now, one point I want to make here is being different is not about being different for the sake of being different. And a lot of people misunderstand this. It's like I would say, I don't care about the color of your hair. I don't care about your pronouns. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is what you're doing differently to satisfy the cravings of another person. So you're here to serve people by being different. You're not being different for the sake of being different. Okay. And so, with that sort of framework, tomorrow, decide to do something different for somebody. Just one thing. That's all. Just give up something and do something different. The day after, do two things differently. Get used to the fact that you're going to step out and be contrarian in a way that people care about. I'm not asking you to go piss a bunch of people off. All right. That's not it, because it's not about you. It's about other people around you. Find a customer. Go ask them what they crave. No, you don't ask them that way, but you can find out what. Go start doing these little things and let them build momentum, right? And let them serve you after you have the bravery to actually try it yourself. That's all. Easy peasy.
And you may well have covered this already, but I'd like to ask, because I don't get to speak to many people who've got 40 years of executive experience. So if there's one thing you would like to change and like to see mixed up in the leadership world, what would it be?
Well, that's the problem, John. There's not just one thing. Okay. Like there's no silver bullet in leadership. I would say that the whole notion of serving people and breathing life into what that means from a leadership point of view around the question, how can I help in an execution context? So you see this whole thing, everything's related. Okay. Leaders need to set a course. Okay. They need to embrace uncertainty. They need to be imperfect fast. They need to be hiring for goosebumps, right? They need to be fingerprint leaders. They need to do it yourself. They need to be line of sight. They need to do all of these things, okay, to truly make a difference, because there isn't just one thing. And I think that's part of the challenge that certainly I'm seeing, is that people are asking for that one thing. And I keep saying, dude, there's not one thing. I'm sorry. Life isn't that easy. It's like saying, what is a single thing I need to do tomorrow to be happy? Come on. It's not that easy, because tomorrow is probably going to be something different than you and I are actually talking about right now. And so for me to even answer it today is kind of like nonsensical. I mean, it's just that notion that says we need to get people comfortable with having a basket of good things to feast on. We need to do that. And hopefully through conversations like this, we can get people at least thinking that way. The education system has taught us and done a really good job of teaching us to look for the silver bullet. And in retrospect, it's a travesty. Okay, because the academic silver bullet is not a practical silver bullet at all. It's actually bad advice. And so I will always say to you, have context, focus on execution, do the right thing as a leader, ask people how you can help, put your fingerprints on the stuff that leaders should put their fingerprints on, create translation capabilities for your organization to understand and agree on the journey that you're on, and tell them that you love them along the route. That's all you got to do. And watch the magic.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic advice. And I think you've answered it splendidly. If you are putting constraints on what you should be doing, it's just putting yourself in a cage and you're not thinking differently, which is exactly what all your books are about. So be different or be dead. And if you were to explain exactly what your books are around, how would you summarize them? Because I know you're up to your 7th book now.
Yeah, so the first one I wrote in 2009, and it was called Be Different or Be Dead, Your Business Survival Guide. And I wrote it at a time when the economy worldwide was kind of challenging. And so I wrote it from the perspective of, to survive, you need to be different, because there's this other phrase I use is, if you're not different, you're dead or soon will be. And that was kind of born out of those times. And so it was organized by function, marketing, sales, et cetera, et cetera. What I discovered, and by the way, the thing that surprised me was how sticky the only statement work was from that book. People saying, wow, I do talk like I'm better and best, and it doesn't mean anything. And so they got the idea of the only statement. But then I got a lot of people saying, I need to know a little more about leadership. Roy, could you just take a deep dive? How about careers? Could you do a deep dive, a slice on that? So I was getting requests to slice the information because it's so broad and it's so deep. When you start talking about a how-to book and a practical book, it's deep because that's what the practical achievement is. It's deep and there's a lot of them. It's like raining down things that you need to prioritize and do. And so after that, I wrote 5 ebooks. Okay. I didn't print them. I just did them on ebook because they were thin and just a deep dive. And then 18 months ago, I thought, well, okay, it's time to go back to the original body of work, only this time from a growth point of view. And so that's why I came up with this audacious, unheard of ways I took a startup to grow $1 billion. In fact, the interesting thing was that was my publisher's idea because I was having difficulty with how to title this because basically it was an updated version of and an added version of the same work. Nothing's changed. Be Different or Be Dead is still there, right? It's just I've learned more about my work, just working with it, etc. So I wanted an updated version, and I was having difficulty figuring out how to title this. And so I got to know my publishers, Morgan James, by the way, in New York, just amazing guys. I'm talking to my publisher. He says, Roy, you can't see it, can you? And I go, what, David? David Hancock. What is it? He goes, it's all about going to $1 billion. I go, hey, he says, have you ever considered that? And I go, no, I haven't. I feel a little uncomfortable with it because I'm just kind of flogging the $1 billion, and it kind of like it feels a little arrogant. He goes, no. He says, people will want to read that book because it may not be $1 billion for them, but it's growth related for them. And the audacious piece was kind of like my add to it because there's nothing in there that's traditional. And I wanted people to understand the word. It's a cool word. It means bold, courageous, risk-taking, et cetera, et cetera. And I call them moves, okay? Because a move is an action that you take. And so I wanted it all to be about action, not thought. I'm not saying be ridiculous in thought. Obviously, the stuff that we're talking about is well-grounded in cognitive processing, but it yields execution, and that's the difference. And so, yeah, that's been out. I've been doing a lot of podcasting because it's my best way to communicate. I just love conversations, and it allows me to express in ways I probably couldn't write just on my own. And even though I do clips and everything else, and I learn from my stuff and I review it, etc. And on a side note, for me, it's a personal journey. I mean, I've met people like you. I've met people all over the world. I've helped people. I've seen eyes light up on a silly concept like goosebumps. I go, whoa. I've had arguments. I mean, I've done the whole human gamut of kind of like emotions around this. And for me, it's still a growth thing. And I'm still motivated to continue to have conversations and see if I can get my tribe to grow.
Fantastic. But I've had a really great time having a conversation with you and learning so much just about strategy and just a reminder not to put constraints on yourself and think a bit differently. And just to make other people the focus, well, whether it's business or the customer, it's just looking outwards rather than looking inwards so much, which I think a lot of us still do. I think there's just a few questions I'd like to ask at the end of the interview to get to know you a little bit better and find out a little bit about what motivates you. And talking about your books, it does lead on to the first question. Is there one book that you can think of that's had the biggest influence on you?
Yeah, it's called The Marketing Lessons from the Grateful Dead. The Grateful Dead was a 60s rock band out of the US, the most successful touring band in history. What people don't know is that Jerry Garcia, rest in peace, may he rest in peace, was not just a great guitar player. He was an amazing business person. And in fact, in a world of that didn't have social media, he created disruptive business practices that people shook their heads at, exactly the same thing as they do with some of the stuff that we were able to do. For example, in a world where music rights were protected and nobody wanted to share music, right? Because they thought that they were giving up their rights of ownership. What Garcia did in the Grateful Dead is they constructed for every concert a separate stand for their fans that would allow them to record their music. Because Garcia figured out that, wait a minute, sharing is actually a pretty good marketing tool. Because when people share their music and they like their music, guess what they end up doing? Yeah, buying records. And so things like that, he actually coined the expression that I stumbled on after I started doing my work around the only statement. It was Garcia that said, you don't want merely to be the best of the best. You want to be the only one that does who you do. Grateful Dead. And to this day, if you go onto their website, they've got the most amazing products and services. I buy their t-shirts and everything else. Anyways, it was probably, and it's a how-to book, probably one of the most influential and grounding books for me I've ever read.
Yeah, just from the description that you've given, I can completely see why that's resonated. No, it's a great selection, so I'll be checking that one out. And in terms of to get you in the right mindset each day, I'd imagine it's been quite a stressful place running a business, which is so vast. Is there one thing that you do to set yourself up to be in the right mindset for the day?
I get up early. I'm a morning person. I get up. Well, actually, the older I get, the earlier I wake up, which is kind of, I don't know why that is, but I'm up early. I write. I'm a prolific writer. My blog goes back to 2009. So for people who want to know a little more about what Be Different or Be Dead is all about, if you check out my blog, I blog every week. And so I do a lot of writing, and it's all on my iPad or my iPhone. I write wherever I am, wherever a thought hits me. Maybe that's a function of my memory, John. I don't know, but I have to capture it. And so I start my day by writing. I have my cup of coffee and my iPad, and I just start writing about thoughts that have hit me. I always check my notes from podcasts such as we're doing here. I always listen to the podcast, and that gives me ideas to further blog and go deeper in my content. Because again, like I said, I find this medium really, really useful for me because I'm a very kind of spontaneous person, right? And I come up with ideas on the run. Nothing's premeditated, although I have a couple of notes, obviously, because I want to make certain points. And so I use that as information. And I write for a while, and then I just go and do stuff during the day. My wife and we love to go walking. We got a place in Whistler we're going up tomorrow. There's a lot of snow up there, so we're going to go up and hang out for a few days. But still, the behavior doesn't change. I'm up in the morning, just a different physical environment. I'm writing. I'm answering emails. I'm doing all that kind of stuff. So she often criticizes me of saying, will you never retire? And I go, probably not, but I don't consider this arduous in any way. I find it exhilarating, and the ability and capability to help people express different points of view and do different work, I find highly gratifying, and I'm never going to stop.
So thank you. And I love the journaling. I'm exactly the same with notes. I'm constantly just have a thought, jot it down, and might come back to it in 2 years, but it's there. And I'll definitely revisit it so I can do exactly the same as what you do there. Is there one lesson in life or business that you wish you'd learned sooner?
Well, I think the whole how to differentiate, how to be different. If I had the power to collapse literally 2 decades into a beginning, that would be it, because it would allow me to skip a whole lot of the painful learning that I got on the way. It's like doing a present value of an annuity stream, right? So if I could present value all of that for 2 decades down into when I was actually asked to undertake this leadership challenge, that would have been helpful, but impossible. But no, it is what it is. I mean, I don't regret anything that we did. We made a lot of mistakes. We tried a lot of stuff. We failed. We won. We were exhilarated. We were grateful. We were happy. We were engaged. I mean, we had the characteristics of an organization that I don't think you see that much today. I really don't. And again, I keep holding leadership accountable. That's not a function of the employees. It's a function of leadership, which is another angle. I mean, leaders need to take accountability for the organization and the culture that they create. They have to do the work, and the work isn't being done. And so for other people, I wish that they could kind of get the virus, right? So that they could make some changes. Can you imagine? I often think about this, like there's kind of like the old normal distribution curve, the bell curve. You got the right hand side of the tail, which are the kind of mavericks, disruptors, discontinuity creators, and you got the left side, which are the people that don't basically do anything or they fight. Then you got the glut of people in the middle, right? 90% of the people fall in the middle, which are people who are doing life, doing business the way they think they should do it. I keep thinking about, can you imagine the benefits and power unleashed to society and individuals and employees if we could move that glut just 2 points to the right? That's all, just 2 points, because there's so many people sitting in that middle of the normal distribution curve. It would have an unbelievable multiplier effect on the world. And I always often think about that, and then I go, wow, I'm not so sure I'm going to be around to see that. And that's a failing. That's a failing. That's my one failing, is I underestimated kind of like the power of momentum of the past, the power of inertia, the power of people who don't want to take risks because we taught them the wrong thing, the power of institutions teaching conformance behavior. I underestimated that. I thought most people would be up and open to something, especially my work that is proven, right? It's not like, wow, it's another dumb idea, Roy. No, it helped us get to 1 billion. I underestimated that, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to keep hammering away at it, John.
Well,
Got to keep going, man.
I think that's a great thing, though. You said it's one of the things you'd love to have learned earlier in life about being different, but I think that's something that myself and listeners today can definitely take away and start implementing. And I think just the message about being the only and focus on what's the only thing that is going to set you apart. So I think that's a great lesson for all of us. For anyone who does want to find out a little bit more about what you do and get in contact and connect with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, you can check. I have a website, bedifferentorbedead.com. I've tried to put as much support and content on there as I can. As I say, I have a blog that I do regularly, and so you can go search the blog for various subjects. You search for Goosebumps, and you'll find a plethora of articles that I've written on Goosebumps. And there's a page on my books if you wanted to check that out. There's also a quiz, a Be Different or Be Dead quiz on there, which says if you're curious as to if you think you're different, for example, you're doing some of this stuff, take the quiz and find out the degree to which you're actually conforming to a set of Be Different or Be Dead principles that I've got in the quiz. It's kind of a funny thing. It's fun, but it's intended to sort of point out areas that you might want to focus on. So it's not a test. It's just kind of like a priority setting tool. And as I said earlier, I've got an email, roy.osing@gmail.com. And I'm happy. Feel free to use me. I'm really happy to have a conversation with anybody about this. And I do. Not as much as I would hope, but there are people out there who are intrigued enough to follow up and have a conversation with me, and I'm more than happy to help out.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for being on. Really appreciate you taking your time out to have a talk with us today, and there's a lot of takeaways for myself and all the people listening, so thank you for your time.
My pleasure. I'm grateful, John. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.